playing?
Yep.
Welcome back, and this week we're going to be making a bit of lamb rack with some chimichurri and fresh cherry tomatoes since we're in tomato season. So chimichurri, super easy. A bunch of parsley. You're going to throw this all into a Vitamix. Along with that, you're going to need extra virgin olive oil, about half a cup to a cup, kind of depends on how much parsley you throw in there. So start with less because you can always add more. So this is about a half cup to 3/4 of a cup of extra virgin olive oil. And chimichurri, I personally like it extremely tangy, so this is about a 1/4 cup of sherry vinegar. We're gonna add that in, as well as half a lime worth of juice and 2 cloves of garlic raw. And of course, we're gonna season this with salt and pepper. Of course, go a little lighter. You can always add more, you can't take away. And we're gonna just throw this on high and we're gonna blend this till it's silky smooth. If you want it chunkier, then leave it chunky. Go ahead and blend it, and once it gets nice and green, of course here we're gonna add a little bit more. If you see that it's a little too thick, add a little bit of vinegar, add a little bit of oil, and it will start to smooth out. Of course, taste it, make sure everything's right. I'm gonna add a little bit more lemon juice and a little more vinegar, and then just keep blending. And as soon as you're ready, just go ahead and take that out and you're done. Now it's time for the lamb. This is just rack of lamb. I've had it Frenched, so you can go ahead and ask the butcher to French it. Normally they have it Frenched. If not, you can do it at home. It's totally okay. I like to leave a little bit of that fat still on the bone since I like the flavor of lamb. I know some people find lamb a little gamey. It's totally up to you. But we're just gonna cut these in half just to make it a little easier to fit in the pans. You can definitely use this, just one large rack into a pan. I just like to separate it, makes it a little easier to cook. And of course we're gonna season these with salt. And if you'd like, and I recommend, is letting them dry a little bit and the night before in the fridge. Just keep in mind that this is gonna intensify that lamb flavor. So if you're a little iffy about lamb to begin with, maybe just let it sit by itself in the bags. Don't let them air dry because it's just gonna intensify that gaminess. And as always, into a heavy bottom skillet, we're gonna add a little bit of grapeseed oil, heat that up, and we're gonna put the fat side down of the lamb, or the seasoned side down. We're gonna let it sit in that nice oil, and we're not gonna touch it. We're just gonna let it sit there, and that fat's gonna start to render out and caramelize. Also, don't overcrowd your pan as it will begin to steam and you won't get that crispy skin that you're looking for. So give it a check after 2 minutes. You can see it's browning. Put it back down, and we're just going to leave it there. Here you can see it's beginning to brown, both of them. And we're just going to rotate them a little bit in that pan, and that's going to kind of move that surface area of that fat, and we're going to get a little bit more caramelization. So if by rotating this, you can do the same with steaks or chicken, and it's just going to help that browning process. And we're going to make sure that we're getting all angles of the lamb, so the sides and the front, so kind of lean it up against the pan so that everything's getting browned. It's important to keep moving it since you do have that bone in there. You want it to cook evenly, so we're going to keep moving this around, making sure the sides cook, making sure the bottom where the ribs connect to the bottom of the loin itself are cooking. So keep it moving around to make sure that we're getting even cooking so we don't have one side cooked more than the other. And here we're gonna begin to baste our lamb, so we're gonna flip it so fat side down, and we're gonna add in a little bit of butter, some rosemary, and some garlic, and we're gonna baste over the bones there since how they lean, it's hard for them to cook in the pan. So we're gonna help them out a little bit. So we're gonna throw some butter in there, and we're gonna slowly throw the butter on top and make sure we get some nice cooking on that side. Again, keep your butter moving. As long as it's bubbly and foamy, you're good. As soon as you start to lose that, it means your butter's burning and you're gonna wanna change it out. And here we're just gonna give it a little bit of a rotating, and we're gonna do the same to the fat side. We're just going to baste it. We want it to keep it even. We want it to cook evenly through all sides. This is also going to help render the fat so you don't have any raw lamb fat, which is not very pleasant. You want it to be all crispy, nice and soft, completely cooked. And of course, we're going to let this lamb rest. So we're going to let it rest for 5 to 7 minutes on a wire rack. Don't touch it. If you cut into it, you're going to lose all the juices. It's going to be nice and dry since lamb is pretty lean. And we're just going to throw some of that butter, a little bit of garlic and rosemary right on top of that lamb. We're just not going to touch it. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist until you're ready to cut into it. And in the meantime, while that's resting, we're going to make a bit of a pan sauce. So this is just a water. If you have some lamb stock or beef stock, that's totally okay. So about ½ cup of water is going to go into that pan with about ¼ cup of port. And we're going to let that simmer. We're going to add in about a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. Remember, this had that butter, the lamb fat, the garlic, and the rosemary. We did drain off some of that fat that was on there, if not, it'd be too rich. And we're just going to let that simmer. We're going to whisk it together so that Dijon dissolves in. We're going to add quite a bit of pepper. And we're going to reduce this till it's relatively viscous. You're going to stick to the back of the spoon. Right now it's quite liquidy, but let it go. Keep your eye on it because it will evaporate quite fast and you will burn it since there's a lot of sugar in port. We're going to add in a pat of butter just to add a little bit of richness, viscosity. Who doesn't like butter? We're going to mix that around, let it dissolve and just reduce slightly. You can see here that it's thickened, the bubbles are nice and big, and we're going to remove it. Alright, so along with the lamb, we're going to do some cherry tomatoes. These are from our garden. They're super, super sweet, so we're going to not play around with them too much. So we're just going to cut them in half. That is it, and then we're going to toss them in that pan sauce we made with a little bit of that chimichurri, and that's it. It's going to be warmed through with that pan sauce because it's nice and hot, and then a little bit of chimichurri for that tang and herbaceousness, and that's it. So this ended up being about 2 tablespoons worth of that pan sauce. And about a teaspoon of the chimichurri. We're just going to mix that up together. It's nice and hot. The tomatoes will slightly be warmed through, but we want to keep them relatively untouched. And of course, we're going to taste this for seasoning as always, so add a little bit of black pepper, a little bit of salt as needed. So it's been 7 minutes since we cooked that lamb. We let it rest, and now we're going to cut into it. I like my lamb relatively rare since it is a quite lean piece of meat, so it can get dry very fast, so I like to eat it just on the rare side. The fat is completely rendered, as I find very important. But that is it. We're just going to cut them, leave the bone on. 2 on a plate because 1's not enough. And along with that are cherry tomatoes that have been warmed in that pan sauce with the chimichurri on one side. Make sure you get all that sauce that's been sitting at the bottom, all that tomato liquid that's leached out as it warmed through, as well as the chimichurri. And then we're just going to add a little bit of the chimichurri itself, just right in the center. I love chimichurri, I love the tang, I love the bite, the garlic, and then that's it. Super easy, only takes a couple minutes. By a couple minutes, I mean around 45 minutes to make this. It's super, super easy. Don't need a lot of ingredients, and it's great for the summer. Thank you so much for watching. We hope to see you next week. Videos every Tuesdays and Saturdays, and we hope that you subscribe and go ahead and give it a like. We'll see you next week.